when Sibling Rivalry turns into a comedy show. Leo Hawthorne considered himself a man of principles. His principles included, but were not limited to, folders organized by color and date, a strictly regimented diet of pre-portioned quinoa and chicken breast, and the absolute belief that his younger sister, Maya, was a vortex of chaos put on Earth specifically to test his commitment to order. At 25, Leo was a junior accountant at a respectable firm in suburban Connecticut. His tie was always straight, his shoes always polished, and his soul was perpetually stressed. He lived in the split-level family home they inherited, meticulously maintaining his half of the property like a highly policed microstate. Maya, 22, was an art school dropout, a barista, and a human glitter bomb. She believed in chaos, bright colors, and the philosophical superiority of forgetting where your keys were. Her half of the house looked like a thrift store exploded and then knitted itself back together with yarn and irony. She believed Leo was a spreadsheet brought to life, perfectly formatted, utterly devoid of emotional macro functions. The central battleground was the living room, a neutral zone by necessity, but one that both siblings constantly tried to colonize. Leo would nudge Maya's hand-painted, slightly unsettling ceramic gnome collection a half-inch closer to the wall. Maya would retaliate by replacing all the bookmarks in Leo's accounting textbooks with whimsical stick-on googly eyes. Maya, I have clocked this remote control in 4 different locations in the last 48 hours, Leo said one Tuesday evening, standing stiffly in the doorway, holding a universal remote control as if it were a biohazard. This is a failure of spatial reasoning. How hard is it to use the wicker basket designated for electronics? Maya, currently engaged in a deep study of whether avocado toast qualified as performance art, barely glanced up from her easel. Leo, darling, the remote gravitates toward the center of attention. It's a drama queen like me. It doesn't want to be caged in wicker. It's home organization station number 3, Leo corrected, his voice tight. And if you continue to leave your half-finished, clay-molded interpretations of our parents' arguments on the floor, I'm going to declare them a tripping hazard and invoice you for liability insurance. They're called Filial Frustration, Series A, and they are sculptures. Maya shot back. And if you keep labeling the reusable shopping bags with their date of acquisition, I'm going to use them to carry manure. Their rivalry was a constant, simmering sitcom that only they, and occasionally their bewildered mail carrier, were privy to. But that was about to change. The inciting incident arrived in the form of a badly printed flyer taped to the community mailbox, the Harmony Heights Annual Talent Showcase, $1,000 grand prize. Leo saw the announcement while collecting his mail, which was, naturally, sorted into the correct pile, bills, versus the incorrect pile, junk mail, before he even crossed the driveway threshold. $1,000, Leo muttered, doing the immediate mental calculation. That could buy a top-of-the-line, German-engineered label maker, or perhaps fund a full professional closet reorganization. An organized, proven talent would surely triumph. Inside, Maya was already reading the flyer, which she had crumpled slightly, likely because she found its symmetry offensive. An outlet for raw, unbridled artistic expression, Maya declared dramatically, sweeping her arm across the room and nearly knocking over a large can of turpentine. I'm doing my abstract existentialist poetry. I just need a fog machine, a single spotlight, and maybe a live pigeon to symbolize the futility of ambition. Leo stared at her, horrified. You are not taking the pigeon that roosts on the porch, and you are not going to embarrass our family in front of the entire HOA. If anyone is going to win that prize and restore order to this household, it will be me. Oh, you're performing too? Maya raised a skeptical eyebrow. What's your act? Reading the tax code aloud in C major. It is far more sophisticated, Leo sniffed. I shall be presenting a meticulously choreographed, 5-minute history of the Dewey Decimal System, complete with PowerPoint integration and a surprise finale involving precisely 500 numbered index cards tossed into the air. The stakes were instantly raised far beyond the $1,000 prize. The winner gets to redecorate the shared living room, Maya declared, pointing a paint-stained finger at Leo. The loser forfeits all veto power. Deal? Leo's eyes glazed over with the image of a perfectly beige, minimalist living space, free of mismatched socks and ceramic gnomes. Deal. Rising Action 1. The War of Preparation. The house descended into a state of total, weaponized preparation. Leo transformed the garage into a sterile rehearsal studio. He ran his performance, which he titled Order in the House, a numeric narrative, to a metronome, perfecting the cadence and posture. He recorded himself, generating performance metrics in an Excel sheet to track improvements in verbal delivery consistency and index card toss dispersion rate. His practice sessions were torture. The climax, the index card toss, required an unnervingly specific trajectory. He needed the cards to land in an aesthetically pleasing pattern on the stage, which he marked out with painter's tape in the garage. But the cards often scattered wildly, sometimes even hitting his face. He blamed the house's chaotic energy emanating from Maya's upstairs bedroom. Maya, meanwhile, was experiencing artistic block, which she handled by staying up until 3 a.m., drinking questionable homemade kombucha and purchasing questionable materials online. Her act, initially abstract poetry, morphed into the sensory overload of suburbia, a spoken-word performance involving a kazoo, a full-body spandex suit, and a 1980s answering machine that played back angry voicemails from their mother. The true comedy, however, was in the domestic sabotage. Maya was practicing her kazoo solo one afternoon when she realized her entire supply of extra-fine holographic glitter, essential for the suburbia part of her act, was gone. In its place was a note from Leo, disposed of as a carcinogenic environmental pollutant, replaced with non-toxic, government-approved, low VOC white sand. See attached MSDS. That night, Leo opened his meticulously labeled, alphabetized spice cabinet to prepare his pre-portioned chicken. Every single jar, from anise seed to Zanzibar, had been emptied and refilled with a different variety of cheap, colorful party confetti. On the cabinet door, a tiny note, "The spice of life is fun, Leo. Get a hobby." The ultimate escalation happened over the family minivan, which they both needed to transport their props. Leo needed it for the 500 index cards and the complex tripod-mounted projector for his PowerPoint. Maya needed it for the life-sized, papier-mâché replica of a poodle she felt symbolized societal artifice. Leo booked the van's use on a shared Google Calendar, blocking out 2 hours precisely. Maya saw the booking, went into the garage, and, in a moment of inspired spite, covered the entire exterior of the minivan in brightly colored post-it notes, each one bearing a single word from her abstract poem. The minivan was, for 2 days, a moving, highly visible piece of public performance art. Leo, unable to drive the post-it covered vehicle to his performance metrics meeting, had to take an Uber, which he promptly billed to Maya, along with a line item for removal of vandalism and psychological distress. Rising action 2, the rehearsal disaster. 3 days before the showcase, the community center forced them to share the stage for a mandatory run-through. When Leo arrived, the stage was already coated in a fine layer of rainbow-colored sand from Maya's preliminary mood setting. He glowered, carefully unrolling a clean, white plastic tarp to demarcate his area. I only need 20 feet, but I've allocated 25 for contingencies, which, in your case, is the distinct possibility of an emotional breakdown, Leo informed her coolly, adjusting his pocket protector. Maya, who was attempting to wrestle the papier-mâché poodle onto a rolling cart, ignored him. I'm trying to channel the energy of 1,000 suburban dogs barking at the void. Quiet, please. My muse is fragile. Leo began his run-through. He stood center stage, posture rigid, and launched into his script. Good evening, and welcome to the Dewey Decimals, a quest for perfect structure. My friends, in a world of information asymmetry, we require a system, a bedrock of classification that transcends the petty whims of the... At the exact moment Leo reached the word, petty, Maya's rolling cart, which she had failed to properly lock, began to roll slowly toward the front of the stage. The paper poodle gained momentum, a silent, grinning menace heading straight for Leo's feet. Leo, deep in his monologue about the 800 to 900 literary classification section, was blind to the impending doom. Maya saw it and yelled, "Stop the dog. The art is moving." Leo, thinking this was part of Maya's insane rehearsal, didn't flinch. And only through the 900s history and geography can we truly understand spatial logic. The papier-mâché poodle hit Leo's legs with the force of a small, decorative truck. He stumbled forward, throwing his hands out to steady himself. His entire stack of 500 index cards, perfectly numbered 0.1 to 999.9, exploded from his grasp. Instead of a controlled finale, it was a blizzard of white rectangles, scattering across the stage, the auditorium, and, disastrously, into the control booth where Mrs. Henderson, the notoriously gossipy chair of the social committee, was checking the sound system. My data. Leo shrieked, a sound of pure, unadulterated panic. Maya rushed forward to help, but in her haste, she slipped on a patch of the rainbow sand and slammed into the tripod holding Leo's projector. The projector tipped, the bulb shattered, and the last image projected onto the curtain was a frozen, pixelated close-up of a decimal point. Mrs. Henderson emerged from the control booth, covered head to toe in index cards. She peeled one off her forehead. It read, 796.8, Combat Sports, Martial Arts. Mr. Hawthorne, she said, her voice dangerously calm. This is a disaster. I believe the audience will find this quite engaging. Perhaps you should consider leaning into the chaos. Leo and Maya stared at each other over the body of the papier-mâché poodle, both splattered with glitter, paper, and the bitter knowledge that they had just performed an accidental, perfect piece of physical comedy for the most influential gossip in Harmony Heights. The word was out. Their family rivalry had just been elevated to public spectacle. Climax, the showcase night. The night of the Harmony Heights annual talent showcase arrived. The auditorium was packed, and there was an unusually high number of community members clutching binoculars. Leo was scheduled after a nervous teenager playing a competent but forgettable cello piece. He adjusted his perfectly knotted silk tie one last time. He had meticulously rewritten his 500 cards, but he was operating on 3 hours of sleep and pure, aggressive caffeine. He walked onto the stage, the spotlight hitting him. He took a deep, centering breath. This was it. Order would prevail. He began his speech, hands trembling only slightly. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to a journey through organized thought. Let's begin with a 000S, computer science, information, and general works. He reached into his inner pocket for his cue cards, but instead of the stiff, numbered index cards, his fingers encountered a sheaf of construction paper, bound together with glitter glue and smelling faintly of cinnamon and desperation.
Maya.
In her final act of pre-show spite, she had swapped his serious index cards with her own set of notes for the sensory overload performance, which included a script, stage directions, and her abstract poems. Leo stared down at the card in his hand. It did not say 100s, philosophy and psychology. It read, stage direction. Stare at the audience like they owe you money. Whisper the word kale. Panicked, Leo looked up. The audience was silent, expectant. Mrs. Henderson was taking notes on a small pad. He couldn't stall. He had to perform something. His internal accountant short-circuited. His years of structured thought collided violently with the absurdity in his hands. He improvised. Welcome, Leo announced, his voice cracking slightly. He clutched the colorful card. We begin with a Q3-2025 financial statement of existential dread. He stared at the audience like they owed him money. He whispered, kale. The audience snickered. Leo's mind raced. He flipped the next card. The suburban lawn is a lie. Leo ran a hand through his perfectly parted hair. The suburban lawn, friends, is a fiscally irresponsible venture. It represents deferred maintenance and an unsustainable asset-to-liability ratio. Furthermore, the 400 section language tells us that the word trim is an absolute unit of aesthetic compliance. The absurdity of the delivery, a tightly wound accountant, sweat glistening, ranting about lawn care and accounting jargon while holding a glitter-glued note card, was pure, unintentional comedy gold. Leo's attempt at solemn seriousness only made it funnier. He ended his act by accidentally dropping his microphone and then trying to kick it back up with the heel of his polished shoe, a move that only resulted in him nearly falling over. The audience gave him a standing ovation of bewildered laughter. Leo retreated backstage, flushed, humiliated, and convinced he had single-handedly destroyed the Hawthorne legacy. Then it was Maya's turn. She was dressed in her spandex and googly eye suit, clutching her kazoo, ready to deliver her deep, serious piece on the symphony of traffic noise. She saw Leo backstage, hiding behind a velvet curtain, utterly defeated. "They loved you, Leo," she said, her voice unusually soft. "They were laughing at me, Maya." I referenced the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, and then dropped the mic. It was a failure of structure. "No, it wasn't," Maya said, suddenly realizing the truth. "They were laughing with the absurdity of it. Your chaos is funnier than my planned chaos." Maya looked out at the expectant crowd. She put down the kazoo. She tossed her abstract existentialist script into the poodle replica. She walked onto the stage, took the mic, and adjusted the googly-eyed suit. She looked directly at the crowd, her usual artistic angst replaced by a mischievous glint. "Hi, everyone," she said, the microphone feedback briefly squealing. "My name is Maya, and I'm going to skip the interpretive dance and tell you a story about living with a man who color coordinates his garbage bags." The audience leaned forward. For the next 5 minutes, Maya didn't perform art. She performed life. She recounted the post-it note minivan war, the confetti for spices exchange, and the time Leo left a 12-page, single-spaced memo detailing the appropriate towel folding technique. She imitated Leo's rigid posture, his terror when she brought home a snake, and his disastrous attempt to learn breakdancing using a YouTube tutorial named Optimal Joint Rotation Ratios. Her material was real, raw, and relentlessly funny because it was based on the universal, shared truth of sibling rivalry taken to an insane, American suburban extreme. The audience was roaring, the judges were doubled over, and Mrs. Henderson had abandoned her notes entirely, dabbing tears from her eyes. When she finished, the applause was deafening. The grand prize went to a nice older gentleman who sang a flawless, beautiful rendition of an Italian opera aria. But when it came time for the special awards, the host, a nervous man in a bow tie, returned to the stage. And now, for a new category this year, one that speaks to the unpredictable genius of Harmony Heights. The judges have been absolutely unanimous in their decision for the Breakout Accidental Comedy Duo Award. Leo and Maya, standing side by side backstage, knew. The host beamed. The award, and $500 to split between them, goes to the Hawthorne siblings Leo and Maya for proving that the best comedy is born from the most hostile domestic environment. Falling action and resolution. Backstage, holding a ridiculously small, plastic trophy labeled special mention, Leo and Maya stood in an awkward silence. "So," Leo said, adjusting the trophy in his hands as if trying to find its optimal center of gravity, "we didn't win the main prize. The living room bet is null and void." Maya shrugged, a confetti flake drifting from her hair. "Maybe that's for the best. I was going to cover the walls in tinfoil, and you were going to install motion-activated security cameras to monitor dust." "I was going to do both, actually," Leo admitted softly. Maya snorted a laugh. "You were incredible, Leo. The kale thing? Genius." "I was having a nervous breakdown," Leo insisted. "But your act, it was good. I mean, it was basically an unprovoked public attack on my character, but it was funny." "It's not an attack if it's true," Maya countered. "But the thing is, I realized why I find your meticulousness so annoying." "Why?" "Because it's a performance, too," she said, gesturing to his now slightly askew tie. "It's your way of expressing yourself. And tonight, when you accidentally broke character, the audience loved it. They loved you." Leo looked down at the trophy, then back at his sister, who was covered in spandex and googly eyes. They were polar opposites, yet they had just collaborated on the single most successful thing they had ever done, by trying to destroy each other. "Maybe," Leo said slowly, a terrifying idea dawning on him, "maybe we should do it again. But together. We could be the debit and credit comedy duo. We could write material based on the intersection of aggressive accounting and existential dread." Maya's face lit up. "We could have a segment called, 'Why is the house always a mess?' A breakdown of capital expenditures versus spontaneous artistic outbursts. And I